the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Okay, so we're recording, and I don't remember. Actually, let's do the intro first.
Okay.
What do I
you do
say?
it?
Yeah.
Welcome to Doom to Fail.
That's right.
Farz.
Welcome to Doom to Fail. I'm Farz, joined here with my co-host Taylor, and every week we bring you a true crime and a historical story about relationships that were doomed to fail. Taylor, how you doing today?
I'm good. I told you a second ago, I'm on vacation. I'm in a gorgeous mansion Airbnb in Temecula, California. It's raining, but it's a beautiful house, so it's fun. I just made breakfast for a bunch of people and came up here.
Did you rent the whole house?
Yeah.
Nice. That's the way to do it.
We used to be just adults, and now we're 6 adults and 6 kids. So there's a lot going on.
It is a full house. Thanks for taking the time to actually do this and record today.
You got it.
Here in Austin, it is South by Southwest starts now. And so I'm doing everything in my power to avoid downtown and anything
like
an
Austin native. Good job.
Yeah, I would assume that's typical or standard. So I don't remember who goes first this week.
I think I do.
You go first? Okay. Do you have a drink in mind?
I do. Do you want to do yours first and then I'll go into mine?
I'm going to Google my drink right now because I totally forgot to come up with the drink.
Okay, I'll tell you mine.
Okay.
Mine is a Heineken, which is a beer from Holland. Did you watch Mad Men?
No, I did not.
Oh, there's a thing in a Mad Men where the Don Draper is obviously an advertising guy, and they do this thing where they are trying to get people to buy Heineken, and so they put it in grocery stores, and they make the end cap the end of the display a big a windmill and stuff to be oh, it's from Holland, and then he has all of his work friends over, and his wife is oh, I got this beer, it's called Heineken, it's from Holland, and all of the advertising guys are yeah, we got her, it worked. And then she was really pissed because she was you set me up to find this beer in the store and fall for your ad. Anyway, I'm going to Holland.
Are we covering Mad Men today?
No, but I always think about that. Someone will know. You know, if you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I didn't think of a drink, but I think given the location of my story, it needs to be coffee. And also
drinking coffee right now.
Yeah, I was drinking coffee too, and also it's the morning here, so it makes sense. It all tracks. And sorry, you said you're the one who goes first this week?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the other day when I have 17 tangents, but when you did the Toolbox Killers, you were oh, maybe I'm going to do friends, not just romantic relationships. And I was that's a great idea, because I don't think I can sustain this for years with just romantic relationships of history, and I'm trying to find ones, and my cousin just sent me one and all these things. But I'm also thinking what about other things that were failures, other crazy times in history that maybe don't have specific people involved, but they were a crazy thing. So that's kind of what I'm going into today. I also was so here's a little bit of backstory. Once upon a time in 2016, I was looking at my Kindle and I found this book that I don't remember how it got there. I don't remember downloading it, but it is called, it's called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it was written in 1841 by a Scottish journalist named Charles Mackay. And it's stories of people who are doing crazy things, and more people are doing it together. And so I don't know how I got it on my Kindle, but I think that I probably downloaded it because it was 2016. So I was mad that people were falling for Donald Trump. And I was what is wrong with people? That's why I think I got it, if that makes sense.
The through line is there. I understand that.
Did you have a big cow skull on your wall now? Is that new?
So I had it up
screenshot this
at the other house, and it was actually sitting on the ground here since I moved into this house, and I finally decided to put it up.
It's very Texas. I like it. I did a screenshot. Wait, smile. I'm gonna do another one. Keep this in. Perfect. It's just you. Okay, great. I just saw it. It looks great. So So this is like what I'm thinking about, like what this book is about. So this book is divided into three parts. There's national delusions, which are like rumors, myths, and legends, like the Crusades is like one of the examples in that one. Then there's peculiar follies, like alchemists and spiritualists. There's a chapter called Haunted Houses about like people falling for like seances and things like that that we talked about before. And there's another chapter on philosophical delusions, like people who think the world is flat, which has like always been a problem, which is hilarious. So a lot of the stuff that like we'll talk about today is stuff that we see constantly, like even now.
So this book is basically just a discussion of different variations of delusions and where they
Yes.
originate. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds
So
awesome. That sounds really interesting.
yeah, it's really fun. So it's a delight. So today we're going to talk about tulips, the flower, and specifically Tulipomania in Holland in 1636 and 1637. Have you heard about this?
No.
Okay, great. So it's like it's a fun thing. I was like, I'm gonna do something really easy this week because I'm going on vacation. And then all of a sudden I'm like learning about botany and economics, but whatever. So here we are. So I watched a documentary called The Tulip Bubble. I read a book called Tulipomania, like another book about it. The book is very dry. There's a lot of like numbers, and we'll talk a little bit about conversion, but they use guilders as like their money that they're using at this time. So there I have a list of kind of like some conversions that we'll talk about in a little bit. So can you picture a tulip? What is a tulip?
It's probably the most generic looking flower outside of a rose, right?
That's fair. It's like a bulb on top of a stem. It actually that like it comes from like kind of like the seed. It looks like an onion. So it's like a big bulb. You plant it and then the flower grows out of it. And the flower itself only lasts for a few months and then you like cultivate the bulb and you do it again. Right now, 80% of the world's tulips come from the Netherlands, and the actual flower is grown in these like really beautiful tulip fields where there's like lines of different color tulips. It's really nice. And then, but really they want the bulbs. So the bulbs they can like send all over the world. And it's like mother and daughter bulbs where some of them will grow new flowers, some of them won't. Whatever, there's like ways to put things together to make a tulip. So we're in Holland in the 1600s, and the economy is booming, like more than other parts of Europe, because there have just been a bunch of wars over there. But in Holland, they kind of avoided those wars. So they're not ruled by a royalty. They're ruled by citizen councils, which gives people a lot of autonomy and like the ability to like move up in society. And this creates a middle class for the first time ever. So for the first time ever, people have money and they don't have like a way to invest it because there isn't like a really like solid banking system. There isn't really a solid stock market. You can't really get in unless you are like uber rich, but the middle class are looking for ways to like invest their money. And this story is like you could just plop it over any time period and find a story that's like very similar to this of just like people trying to get rich quick, you know?
Yeah. It actually reminds me of the most recent last podcast episode of the Essex about how that's how you invested. You just bought into a whaling ship, and that was the stock market back then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You could like buy a boat or like, buy more land, but you didn't like weren't able to like do like money things just
Yeah.
with just money. Exactly. So there's also the Dutch East India Company that's trading and making the country really rich. They also are enslavers, are enslaving a lot of people, but they're getting a lot of money from that. There's also like some of the best painters coming from this time, like the girl with the pearl earring, that Vermeer that I'm sure you've seen, and Rembrandt. It's like a golden age of like art and things. And so people started to think like, as I got more money, like what can I do to like both like glorify God and show, that I have all this money. So they started building gardens. And they, didn't want to like cover themselves in gold, so they would build these really big gardens. So,
Sorry. So that was the way to reflect that you were wealthy?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So to do a little bit of conversion, and I'll come back to this, like if I was going to buy, I guess this is I have a hilarious table, but 8 fat pigs are 240 guilders. 4 fat oxen are 480 guilders. So like, and you could buy a ship for 500 guilders. So like this is like how much start thinking about that money conversion. And I'll come back to that. But like,
Okay. Well, you said ship last. Okay. So that's 500 guilders. Well, how much was what was the other one?
8 fat pigs were 240 guilders.
Wow, a ship's kind of a bargain then.
It is kind of a bargain.
Okay.
I don't know what kind. A silver drinking cup is 60 guilders. So people start, so that's like as people are paying for things. So that's Holland. That's where we are at this time period. People are starting to have more money for the first time. And that's where the tulip starts to kind of be introduced into popular culture. Tulips actually come from Central Asia and Persia. Kazakhstan has a lot of the native tulips in nature. They're shorter and they're really good in like colder weather. So they work in places that like high up in the mountains and they don't need a lot of like sunlight. Right now, it's also a time, it's like a Renaissance time. So people are starting to get interested in science. They're like dissecting bodies for the first time and, doing that like in public and like learning more about anatomy and learning about botany really for the first time. They haven't really like made it a science yet. And I say first time like in this time period. I'm sure that like ancient people thought about botany in different ways and people we don't know, but in this period. So there's a botanist named Carolus Clusius, Carolus Clusius, and he's like one of the first people to be a botanist and to bring the tulip into the Netherlands. He never makes a lot of money, but his friends like take care of him, and he ends up getting a job at the University of Leiden and starting this first like botany school. And he started breeding them. And to breed them, I think you have to move the pollen of one to another one, and then like a male and a female, but like put their pollen together in a way that's like unexpected, and that can make like a different color tulip, I think.
That sounded very scientific.
Doesn't it sound scientific? In the documentary I watched, someone had a Q-tip of pollen and was like putting it on like the stem, like the steam. I don't know. Anyway, he started breeding them, which made different colors of tulips for the first time. They were like really pretty and they have like cool stripes and stuff. So, right, the tulips during the tulip craze that everybody wanted were white with these like really dark red stripes going up them. And I'll share pictures of them. Like they're really beautiful, but it's actually a virus that makes them that color. But they just didn't know anything about viruses.
I actually thought that tulips were always one color. I didn't know that you could get. I'm gonna look up pictures of tulips now.
Yeah, it's like a red and white striped one.
This is the silent portion of the podcast.
This is the visual portion.
Wow, those are really cool looking. They look like marbles almost.
Yeah, they're really pretty. But it's a virus that makes them that color, so it's hard to predict. And tulip bulbs all look like onions, so it's hard to really tell what's going to happen when you have the bulb and what kind of flower it's going to actually turn into.
See, this is why I can't get into gardening because I don't have the patience for this. Like,
Yeah.
you get the bulbs, you plant them, you wait months and months for them to actually grow into the thing. Then you can cross pollinate them, and you don't know what you're doing. And maybe, actually, hold on, wait a minute. Like, so if you cross pollinate, okay, so well, hold on. So like, there's no there's no eggs. So like, what do you get?
No, okay, exactly. So that's a good question. Good question. So what you get is after the flower dies, you dig up the root, and the root is a new bulb. So that bulb you can like continue to like plant, but if you put like the new pollen in it, it will change like the anatomy of that bulb. I have no idea. Does that sound like that could be true? I feel like I don't know.
I mean, if
There's
you
no
say
botanist.
anything with confidence, people are gonna
Yeah.
believe you. But like, I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds like so. Hold on. So okay, so you do this weird plant sex thing, and then in theory, that generates this bulb
hmm
that only is produced after the death of the female
Yes.
flower. Okay.
Yes. Yes. It's sort of like if you were it is sort of like an onion if it had a flower on the top of it. Like you have like you like
Well,
plant
that
an onion and you
concept,
get like the thing.
yeah, that concept I'm familiar with. It's just like it never dawned on me like what is the actual reproductive component of all this. Well, so yeah,
Yeah.
okay. That I guess yeah, you get a bulb. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So some people were trying to like make their tulips different colors. They didn't understand really how it happened. So they would like dissect them and try to splice the bulbs together. They would soak them in red wine, like trying to figure out how to do it. All good ideas. But it ended up being something kind of super unpredictable. Because they're pretty and they're rare, they start to get more expensive, like anything. And there's some fun stories about like, and they may or may not be true, but of like someone going to someone's house and like seeing a tulip bulb and thinking it's an onion and eating it. And then like the guy's like, that was so expensive. And then like someone else like dissecting it because they're like, what is this interesting onion? And then the person being like, I can't believe you would do this, like sending them to jail. Like people are
Yeah.
really freaking out about it.
There's a lot of
Um,
Kramer-esque antics that were going on with tulip
exactly.
bulbs.
Exactly. So then this is where it starts to get like in like economics. So in this time, there's also a lot of like gambling happening in pubs. I don't know, like always. And they describe these pubs, and in the documentary that I watched, they do a great like reenactment of the pub because you can imagine people like the men have like those big frilly collars, that like go out like 6 inches like around their necks and like, big like fun outfits on, and everyone smokes constantly, and they think like it's also like there's like the plague sometimes during this time, so they think that smoking will keep you healthy from that, and they smoke in these like really cool long, like I'm show you like a long white pipe. So you're in this pub, there's a lot of gambling, everyone's a little bit drunk, everyone's smoking, you can't really see across the room because it's full of smoke, also like from like the fireplaces and everything. People start to trade tulip bulbs in these pubs, like in the back rooms. And so they weighed them like you would weigh gold. And they used like the measurement for weighing gold, an ace, to weigh the tulip bulbs. And I don't even know if the weight of the tulip bulb has any effect on the flower itself, but that's like how they were selling them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. You break anything down into like that's how you the unit of measurement. Like it's the weight. How
Yeah.
much does it weigh? It's this much caviar, this much gold.
Yeah, exactly. So they had obviously since, it was a long time ago, they had like chalkboards. Everybody would have like a little chalkboard. And the person selling the tulip bulb would put down what they would accept as a bid and give it to like the guy in charge. Then the guy in charge would collect little chalkboards from every person, and every person's bid would be on there. And then he would find like the bid that made the most sense, show it to the seller, and the seller would either agree or disagree, and then that was how it would get sold. So people were just kind of following along. You could trade and sell the same bulb like several times in a night, just like have like the value kept increasing because people were willing to buy it. And it started to turn into something like an NFT because it didn't exist. Like you would be trading a bulb that didn't for a flower that doesn't exist. So the tulip isn't really the thing anymore. People don't really care about the flower, they care about the value of the bulb. Some of the like really pretty ones and like most famous ones may never have even existed because they had like these beautiful books that they would get and see all these paintings of these different tulips, but no one had ever like seen it and you couldn't guarantee anything anyway. But they would be like, oh, this bulb is going to be this beautiful tulip, and just like that value is based on that assumption that may or may not have been true, but it didn't really matter.
I mean, were these things getting planted?
Not even really, because this happened in like a year, and it takes a year for this whole thing to happen anyway. So what it turned into is a futures market, and now I'm like, oh God, now I'm trading on futures. Like, oh my God, this is a smidge over my head. But I need to call my dad because he used to be a commodities broker in Chicago, so he would totally understand this.
The fact that you just called out like NFTs, like the hair just stood on the back of my neck.
I know. Ugh. Trading in futures is buying something, is having the right to buy something at a certain time in the future at a certain price. Now you have ownership of something that doesn't exist yet, but you're saying when it exists, I'm going to pay this much money. So you can make a lot of money if you say like, I'm going to pay for, $300 for this in 6 months, and if in 6 months it's worth $600, you just made $300. So there's like but it is a gamble. So they're trading it again and again and again before the tulip bulb even exists. Sometimes it hasn't even come out of the ground yet, and they're saying like, I own this tulip bulb, and they have this little piece of paper, and they're trading it back and forth. So you're able to like agree that the price is going to be this much in the future. So people just kept trading and trading, and it gave people the ability to make a lot of money really quickly.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense? And as you know, everyone loves a get rich quick scheme. So everyone started to get involved in it. So a ton of people like sold their houses, sold all their stuff to get into this tulip market because with the assumption that it would never go down.
So
Like
Taylor, one thing I'm confused of, was this literally the only access point for building wealth at the time?
it wasn't like the only one, but and like this whole thing only happens over a few months. So I think it was like a exciting quick one that was like on the news. Not on the news, obviously, but like people were talking
People
about
paid
it.
attention
So
to, yeah.
yeah,
This was the GameStop of their generation.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can put it over so many things that are happening today and be like, oh, like that was valued at this and now it's valued at nothing, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
So people were buying them at 10% of the future price. So if I pay $10 for a future price of $90, I sell it for $200, you know, I made $100, all those things. So at the height of the craze, some tulip bulbs were selling for more than 10 times the annual income of a skilled craftsman. That's like, you know, how I said like a boat was like 500 guilders. They would sell for like 10,000 guilders for a tulip bulb that like didn't exist with the assumption that the price would continue to go up.
I know that hindsight is 2020. This is really stupid though.
I know. But it's just the stock market. It's just like the same thing. You're like assume something's going to have value and continue to go up.
No, it's not like that because the thing that you are investing in can generate money. This is a bulb for a tulip that can't generate anything but a singular tulip.
But they assume that the value of that tulip is going to go up and up. But to
Or
your point, no one ever
but
gets a tulip.
well, okay. So like maybe if the theory was I'm gonna sell I'm gonna if this is the market, I can get a second mortgage on my house, buy two really pretty, I assume, tulips that'll generate a very pretty. But then you paid for the two tulips. And whatever. I'm not gonna ascribe logic to this.
No one ever really got a tulip. It was all just speculation. Because it was all like, you know, I assume that this tulip is going to keep rising, so people keep buying it, and then assuming that they'll always have a buyer. So,
No, okay,
you know what I mean?
yes, people do crazy shit. Okay, we'll just leave it at
Yes.
that.
Okay, there's a story of a man named Wouter Winkle who died and left his children a bunch of tulip bulbs, like actual tulip bulbs that sold to go into the market, and his kids made 90,000 guilders, which is like enough money to be billionaires. They were like the richest people in town. And then at the height of the tulip mania, people are, you know, selling their things, putting all their money into tulips, assuming that this will never ever go down. People just stop bidding on them. And as soon as the prices stop going up, people freak out and sell them, and that is a bubble. So it's just like the housing bubble, just like the tech bubble. It's, you know, valued and valued and valued until it's not, and then everybody panic sells. And so people are ruined because they lost all of their money and they cannot sell these tulip bulbs to anyone, and they can't get their money back because they had done that like promise the person they bought it from.
This feels like when I bought Tesla stock, like literally right before Elon Musk put a bid out on Twitter, and when we all realized that he lost his mind, I was like, oh no, this is awful. Everything just tanked.
Exactly. Um, so on February 24th, 1637, the Dutch Florists Guild, because also like the government wasn't really involved in this. It was like people in like back rooms of pubs and like florists and things. They had to intercede and save some people because basically they had to do bailouts because people were like lost all their money. So they made some rules that like contracts after a certain time were null and void. You could get a certain percentage back and get like a certain percentage of the contract price back. But other than that, like people sort of moved on after it. But it was like it's like a documented time of people kind of going crazy over a thing, learning about trading, learning about futures, trying to figure out like how they can make the most money with the assumption that things will never ever stop being expensive, and then that bubble bursting and people's lives being ruined in like a very short period of time.
Yeah, it makes sense. Taylor, did you do this because of Silicon Valley Bank?
No, that happened yesterday, but
That's weird
it's
timing.
still happening. I know. No, totally. Like having a run on the bank is the same as having like some people stop bidding on tulips. It's yeah, I mean, I'm terrible at economics. I've taken a lot of economics classes and like it's hard for me to wrap my head around it. But like when you see things like this, you're like, oh, this is the same thing that has happened forever. Whether it's like now with my, you know, virtual money in a bank or then with all my like little pieces of paper saying I own tulips that don't exist yet.
You know what? I also did this with Bitcoin. I also bought Bitcoin at the highest. I literally only buy high and sell low. That's the only way I invest.
Opposite of what you're supposed to do.
I know. I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So question, why was it tulips and not like roses or whatever?
A good question. I think it was just because they were like new and they were like rare because they take a while to cultivate. They take that like full year cycle. So you can be like, oh, I have it for, a little bit of time and then um you have to like take the bulb out, take good care of it over the winter and then like replant it in the spring. So I think it was just because they have like that like long life cycle and they were new and they were getting these like beautiful varieties because of a virus like that they couldn't control. They didn't really understand it, but still they were like seeing that. So I think that was part of it. It was, kind of it's like exciting new thing. Yeah, because I already had roses. So
It wasn't
they
it
really
wasn't
do
cool.
it.
The
Yeah.
other weird synchronicity here, Taylor, is after we finish recording this, I'm gonna go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of plants because I realized I need to like start taking care of like the garden space near the house.
Nice.
And
Well,
yeah,
now is the time to buy tulip because they're also a very Easter flower.
it's true. Yeah.
So you'll have them out for Easter. And then also nowadays, because of like science and technology and everything, like you don't have to wait that long. You can buy tulips anytime. Like they've like modified them to be able to like, grow at different times and they're a lot more like, you can use them a lot differently than it wasn't like back then where you had to like really have to wait.
So in this case, is there a doomed to fail premise, or were we just completely abandoning the red flag part of this?
No, I am no, I think it's a group failure, that's what I think it really is because I think well like the book the memoirs of extraordinary popular delusions it's like people together making a decision to do something that is in hindsight kind of crazy
W-
that
Sorry, would this be a classification of folie à deux?
no, I do know because it's more than just two people. Like folly do is like if like you and I are like locked in a house together and I convinced you that someone's trying to kill us, so we kill each other. Like that's folly do, but it's like a group delusion, where people are like, I have all this stuff, like I have all this, these pieces of paper that say on this thing that's going to increase in value, and then you're like, oh my God, I want it, I'll pay you more, and then I pay it to you, and like people just kept doing it, assuming that like the price would always go up. So I think it's a failure, it's a group failure, and I think it's one of those things that afterwards they were like embarrassed.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah.
oh, we went a little nuts with the tulip thing. And then they're like, some people have like lost a lot of stuff. Some people lost a lot of money, but they were already rich. So they were like, meh. But also like with the GameStop thing, then like the poorer people, the people who have the least amount of money do have the most to lose because they are, investing in something at like with more money than they might have. You know what I
Hey,
mean?
did you watch the GameStop documentary on Netflix?
No, I didn't.
These
I
people
should have.
made so much money.
Wow.
They made like retirement, like 20-year-olds were making like retirement money. What I forgot, one guy put like 50K in or something and cashed out 8 million. It was unbelievable.
And there's
I
yeah, and
mean,
that's like the people who cashed out get it, and then some people didn't and lost everything, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, Taylor. I'm gonna look at tulips
Yeah.
when I go to Home Depot, and I'm probably not gonna plant them because I'm lazy and I just need something that's gonna keep coming back year over year. And tulips don't sound like they're gonna
Yeah.
come back year over year.
No, I really don't. I feel like that's too much. The idea of like having to plant the same flower every year because it doesn't come back, that feels exhausting.
Yeah.
Like marigolds. But
So, okay, well, I'll make the transition over to the ever shifting premise of the show, which should be true crime, but in my case is actually not true crime. So
well, great. There we
we'll mix
go.
it up. We'll mix it up this week.
Oh, nice.
So,
Episode 11, new show. Go
exactly.
ahead.
So, well, I started out researching. I was gonna do Michael Alec. Do you know who that is?
No, I
Yeah.
won't look it up,
So
so you can do it later. Or tell me.
yeah,
Whatever.
no, I'll just tell you. I don't think I'm gonna do it now, but I started doing that because so Michael Alec is part of the club kid scene that was part of this New York club. You recognize this? I take it from your
Is the
face.
Macaulay Culkin in the
Party
monster movie?
Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's Party Monster is the dramatized version of Michael Alec. The only really famous one that people would recognize now is RuPaul was part of them. And Michael
Hmm.
Alec ended up killing somebody and going to jail for a long time. He got released and he died actually recently. But
Really?
whatever.
I have been to Limelight, that club.
What's it like?
It was cool. I mean, I think it's closed. I mean, I think it closed a long time ago, but it's in an old church, which is cool.
Yeah, I think our former employer threw a party there actually for a book
Oh,
release.
maybe.
Yeah. So I started watching Party Monster this week because I was like, I'm gonna do Michael Alec, and so I should probably reference the movie. And in the movie, Marilyn Manson's in it, and he basically plays Courtney Love is the only way I can describe it. Just like this like totally insane druggy junkie whatever. And I was like, you know what, I got a better idea for this week. So again, the story this week is not going to be true crime in nature, but it's going to definitely hit on the red flaggy parts of the show's premise. So I've already given enough to indicate what I'm going to be talking about, but I'm still going to pretend like I haven't and just read the outline.
Perfect. I'm ready.
So I'll start by saying that this is a rock and roll story, obviously, and because it's a rock and roll story, there's going to be a lot of legacy building, and so because of that, people are going to have a ton of feelings and passion about like what I'm going to be discussing here today. But because there's a lot of legacy building, there's a lot of conflicting stories out there in terms of when things happened, who was there when it happened. Everybody wants to be a part of the story, which is, I think, a common human phenomenon when certain famous people pass. Outside of like pure facts, there's a bit of speculation here. And by pure facts, I mean location, manner, time of death, things like that. Things that can be like scientifically proven by objective third parties. Outside of that, it's like a lot of just junkies telling stories to each other, basically.
You're a rock and roll guy, so I feel like you're the guy to tell this story.
Am I a rock and roll guy?
No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. So obviously today we're talking grunge, which means we're talking Nirvana and Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, which is like one of the most probably red flaggy relationships that's ever existed in human history. When Nirvana was at its peak and Kurt ultimately died, I was not of an age where I cared about these things. Like, I think he died when I was around 9 years old. So I don't know. I was doing what 9-year-olds do. I don't know exactly what that would be. Probably like, you know, caring about dinosaurs, Power Rangers, things like that. Not hardcore grunge rock. My brother was, though. My brother would have been 14. So I remember going to whatever store, probably Virgin stores, and like him buying the Nevermind album CD.
In like the tall CD boxes.
Yeah.
I remember my mom asking the guy at the store, like, what's Nirvana? And he was like, it's something that happens when you get like your tooth pulled or something. He just said something weird to her.
Was he trying to be funny?
I think so.
Oh, I guess they gas you. So yeah, so at that time I'd never really I didn't understand the ramification of this. I was just not of that age group. But it's weird. I got so much more exposure to it, and you accidentally got some exposure to it as well. So Kurt was raised in Aberdeen, which I've been through there because my ex's father's family was from Hoquiam, and so we'd go there and visit quite a bit. And because you came to my wedding, you've also been through Aberdeen, Taylor.
I think I have, and I remember being there and being like, this place is so fucking depressing. I can absolutely see why you would create grunge music here.
Yeah, like that's I actually put down here, I'm like, I doubt any of your stroll through Aberdeen was actually memorable, but it sounds like it was, because it is exactly what you described it as.
Because I knew where I was, you know. I think I was like, ugh. You know, it was like trailer parks and it was wet, rained. It rains there.
It's on a bay. It had to be, because it was actually a logging town, so ships would come in, collect the timber, and then put them on boats and go wherever they're going. So it's no coincidence that in the late 80s and early 90s, exactly when Kurt's coming up, logging had become a much less viable industry in the area, simply because they tapped that resource completely. There was nothing left to mine for there, essentially. So the town geographically is lovely because it is on this bay. It is the Pacific Northwest. It's lush. It's green. Look, Olympic National Forest is like maybe 20 minutes from here. I mean, I you know, and that is one of the most beautiful, tranquil places that exists in the United States. And Aberdeen's like right outside of that. But given the fact that they tapped this mining resource completely, this timber resource completely, the area is just economically depressed. Like, to your point, it's just like a blown out town. Like, it just, you know, when I would be there, I didn't want to like talk badly about it, obviously, because of like family connections. But I was like, everybody here has to be doing meth. Like, you look at that town and you're like, of course everybody here is on drugs. Like, what else is there to do? There's nothing else here.
Yeah.
So that's where Kurt was raised. So one thing that I actually found really, really lovely about Aberdeen, despite everything I literally just said about it, is that one of my favorite Nirvana songs, like everybody's favorite Nirvana songs, is "Come As You Are," and there's a welcome sign when you get into Aberdeen that says "Welcome to Aberdeen, come as you are," which I
Oh,
thought
that's
was really,
sweet.
really lovely.
That is very sweet.
So going back to the main character, Kurt was born in 1967, and I would describe his childhood as accurately reflected in his music. Not that he wrote about his childhood at all, but then when I think about Nirvana, I think of teenage angst, really. Like, it's just angsty music. That was what it sounds like his childhood was. His parents were divorced. He was a mad kid. He was aimless. The parents remarried. The step-parents sucked. There's domestic violence and there's substance abuse. It sounds like the divorce was a huge triggering factor for him. Like, he talks about it over and over and over again in later in his life. Like, he thought he had this idyllic family, or he would have this idyllic family, and that divorce really seemed to have been like the thing that put him in this the mind space of just being like an angsty teenager, essentially. So all the factors basically existed that would produce a guy like Kurt would eventually become. Some of the stories I read about him seem like just great indicators of his eventual personality. His parents would sign him up for Little League, and he would intentionally strike out so he just wouldn't have to play. He was apparently like a pretty good wrestler, and he hated it. He hated being good at wrestling. He just wanted to like rebel against everything.
Totally.
And when he was in high school, he befriended like the gay kid in school, because when everyone thought he was gay, they would leave him alone because they didn't want to. I mean, you remember what that was like back when we were in school. Like, that was a whole thing. He would spray paint "God is gay" on cars. Like, he was just he was just like very anti-establishment. I found this picture of him when he was 14. He was in some school band, and the other kids around him, he's like sitting on these risers, and these other kids are so happy and they're having fun, and they're just like, the kids are having a good time. He looks like he wants to strangle the drum that is in front of him. Like, he hates it so much, because it's just anything that has to do with normalcy repelled him. It seemed like, at least. So he'd eventually drop out of school and live this like vagabond lifestyle of just sleeping on friends' couches. He started doing his own myth building, saying he like slept under this bridge that everybody said you couldn't sleep under that bridge because the water would just keep coming in. It would just wash you away. He was occasionally homeless. He would meet girls and just shack up with them for a while. And it sounds like he mostly just carried on these relationships for the sake of just having a place to stay. And then these women telling him to like get a job, and he just would refuse to do so. He forms one band early on called Fecal Matter, which was very short-lived. And then he went on to form Nirvana in 1987. One of the things I learned here had to do with Dave Grohl, who, I didn't know this, but he was not the original drummer of Nirvana.
He wasn't? Who was?
So it's this guy named Chad Channing. So their first album ever released, so the big one was Nevermind, but the first album was called Bleach, and that was recorded with a drummer named Chad Channing. And I really hate what happened to this guy, because band people move around and people get fired all the time, but he was so briefly tied to one of the most influential bands in the world, and at that time he wouldn't obviously know that. And now really nobody knows who he is. Like, you literally just asked me, like, who is he? Everybody knows Dave Grohl, but nobody knows Chad. One thing,
there wasn't there like a Beatle too, like a guy who was in the Beatles that left before they became famous?
I don't know that.
It's like that always happens. There was definitely a guy who was supposed to be in BTS and then like got kicked out at the very end, and he was like now he's just like a regular guy, and he's like, I miss my friends. But like, they're superstars.
Yeah, like it's gotta. Well, I mean, I don't know BTS's history. Maybe he knew it was gonna be really big at that time, but like in this case, like nobody knew Nirvana was gonna be what it is. It's like you missed that show. Apparently, in 2013, Nirvana, that was the year Nirvana got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This guy Chad thought he would be in that group, but apparently they only included Kurt, the guitarist, this guy named Chris, and Dave Grohl. And like, listen, I actually, like, I'm gonna go into a little bit of a rant about Dave Grohl here. I love him so much, and he's even cooler than I thought. He made a point to shout out Dave in 2013 for his contribution to Nirvana and to Bleach. He like referenced how he wrote some of the later riffs that they used, and he really wanted to make sure that people knew that this guy was a part of the band, even though he wasn't called out in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So my side note about Dave Grohl, so obviously he went on to found Foo Fighters, which became a phenomenally successful band in its own right. He apparently is also a pitmaster these days and regularly feeds the homeless of LA with his barbecue.
I saw a picture of him doing that recently.
Yeah,
Yes.
he did that recently, but he does it regularly apparently.
Ugh,
I also watched an interview he did with Howard Stern, and I wanted to reach through my monitor and punch Howard Stern for just how
always.
shitty he is to Dave Grohl. Like Dave Grohl handled this with such class, but at one point, because to us, Kurt Cobain is just like this. He killed himself. Like, it is what it is, right? Like, we don't like.
Mhm.
I have no emotional attachment to the guy, but Dave Grohl was like his childhood friend and like bandmate, and
Yeah.
like they traveled the world together, and like they were very very closely tied. And Howard Stern would just say stuff about Kurt's death in just like flippant manner to Dave Grohl that was just really really off-putting. Like
Gross.
he was like, oh, so wasn't it kind of great that he killed himself because it gave you this opportunity to move on and do Foo Fighters? It was just like, and
No, he's my friend.
yeah, like
No.
Dave just was like, no, that's not a good thing. Like, he just handled it very in a classy way, which was really cool to see. So anyways, side rant about Dave Grohl. So in 1991, that was, like I said before, that was kind of their breakout year. That was the year that they released Nevermind. And I didn't know this, but apparently Nirvana pushing Seattle grunge is partially the reason why bands like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains rose in popularity as well. Like, they invented this genre, and then everybody's like
Mhm.
addicted to it now.
Mhm.
So Kurt, by extension, basically becomes the ambassador of this genre that also happens to be the most popular genre of music at the time.
It sounds like he would hate that.
Okay, exactly. So I put this down. Think about this in modern terms. I don't actually know who this guy is now. I wrote down maybe it's Drake, maybe it's Justin Bieber, maybe it's Beyonce. I don't really know. Like, who is it? Do you know?
I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anyone who like started a new genre of music. I mean, I don't know, I'm talking about music, but like I feel like there's people who are really popular, but like all the people you just named, they're pop stars. You know? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I don't know anything new, but I'm also not like in the know, but grunge was like new.
So this is even bigger than that then. So it's even bigger than like a Drake
Yeah.
because it's all new. So imagine
Well,
that. So imagine a guy like Kurt who wants to rebel against everything establishment, and
mhm.
now he is this figurehead in
People are like,
corporate
we love
America.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna actually get into this like a lot when I get to like the suicide note, but like he does not handle this well in his own mind.
Mhm.
I will say that if Kurt didn't have this self-destruct component to him, he actually would have been the exact right guy for this. I watched an interview with him, and his lack of caring about anything is so quintessentially rock star-ish.
Mhm.
You should watch, like, I mean, even like the way you watch like rock stars now, and like I think
Mhm.
like I don't really know rock stars, whatever. Like, is Bono a rock star?
Sure. I mean, he's like really old, but yes.
Sure. Like, but even like younger Bono, like you look at like how he presents himself, you look at how Kurt presents himself, doesn't give a fuck. Like, he's wearing
Yeah.
like shoes that the soles are falling off of, his jeans are just shredded and tattered. Like, not because he's trying to look cool, he literally just does not care. His bandmates had reported this is like a self-reflection on how little he cares. His bandmates had reported that the melody mattered way more to Kurt than the lyrics. So he'd
Mhm.
always come up with the melody and then attach lyrics to it. So it's funny because people would dissect every word he said. And
Totally.
in one interview, someone asked if it's hard coming up with ideas, and he goes, "This is a quote." He goes, "At one point, I was just using poetry and just like garbage that would spew out of me. And a lot of times when I write lyrics, it's in the last minute because I'm really lazy. And then I find myself having to come up with an explanation for it. Like, he just didn't care. Like, he was just like, okay, I guess
Really.
this fits that lyric or that melody."
But I think like I feel like your original question was like how his personality, a different personality, like would have like enjoyed the fame, but then I feel like then the music would have been different. Like he couldn't have been a
You
different
can't have
person,
one. Yeah, you can't have one
you
without the
know?
other. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. So Kurt was quoted as saying, "When you're in the public eye," okay, he's a little bit melodramatic.
He's a little bit melodramatic. I think we could agree on that.
We can agree on that. So
Yeah.
this is a quote: "When you're in the public eye, you have no choice but to get raped over and over again. They'll take every ounce of blood out of you until you're exhausted. I'm looking forward to the future. It will only be another year, and then everyone will have forgotten about it. He's talking about Nevermind at this point.
Mm-hmm.
How wrong was that timeline?
No, I know. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I actually now have two versions of Smell Like Teen Spirit on my Spotify playlist. It's the original, and then I have this other one that like it's a revamped like alt rock version of it. It sounds fantastic.
I've definitely gone through phases where I just like listened to Nevermind over and over again.
Yeah.
Like the whole album. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I actually went down a pretty deep music rabbit hole researching this, especially because we know a lot about the bands that influenced Kurt in particular. So like the Melvins, if you've never heard of them, like that's basically where like the guitar influence kind of comes from.
Mm-hmm.
The Pixies is where that kind of disjointed lyrics that you hear in Nirvana songs come from. Sex Pistols, that's a lot of that anti-establishment stuff that like he was a musical connoisseur. Like his music taste was fantastic. I actually like started I'll send you a list of these bands that I listened to as I was going through researching this. It goes without saying, the melodrama piece of it, he just never thought that anybody was actually hardcore enough. He actually resented his fans in some ways. Like, he thought that if you liked Nirvana for the music, then you had to also like it for the social and political message, which is just very anti-establishment and anti-fitting in. And he's watching kids wearing polos and attending church, listening to Nirvana, and that just like, I think that's a big part of why he basically turned into what he turned into. All this kind of gets us to who he is, his general state of mind, and why things are going to eventually derail. So on the one hand, you have Kurt, who has become basically music royalty, who at his core is basically just this lost kid with a ton of animosity towards being popular. And on the other hand, you have the other main character of our story, which is Courtney Love. Okay. This is the doomed to fail piece of this. So Courtney has always been portrayed as kind of an afterthought to the story of Kurt and Courtney, except to the extent that she's demonized and villainized in it. Like, everybody thinks that Courtney's essentially like this hanger-on, and I'm kind of going to do a bit of like revisionism on her history as well, mostly because Kurt is the main character of the story, and if I went into Courtney's life and the details of what she did, this would just drag on for like 12 hours. Because she's done a lot. She's done a ton of stuff. She's not just Kurt's wife. She had her own trauma growing up. She had her own impactful musical career and all the stuff that she did with that. By some accounts, she was more famous than Kurt when they initially met.
Yeah, Hole is really good.
Hole's great. I listened to Hole too. That's your playlist.
Yeah. Did you have you ever seen 200 Cigarettes?
No.
It's like a very 90s movie about a New Year's Eve party, and she's in it, and she's great.
She's great. Like, the Hustler movie she was in, I don't remember the name of it, but that she was great in that too. Like, she's great in a lot of stuff she does. So yeah, there's some debate on when they met. Some say it was before Nevermind's release. Some say it was after Nevermind's release. But like, if it was before, then Courtney was definitely more famous than Kurt was, because Bleach wasn't a big album by all accounts. And I wrote here, her music's fantastic, and there's a lot of stuff that I learned about like Courtney that I didn't know. So if you remember like my apartment back in LA in Hollywood, which was like, I guess it was relatively close to where you guys lived back then, but I was right down the street from Jumbo's Clown Room, and so she used to work at Jumbo's Clown Room. Like, that was one of her first things that she did while she was trying to get Hole up and running. It's very cool. So however they met, they got married in 1992. They got married in Hawaii, and like, I actually at this point don't even know if Kurt was stoned out of his mind or if he was actually genuinely happy. He looked really happy in the pictures, though.
I feel like I can picture those. Let me find them.
Yeah, it was weirdly like a cute wedding for two incredibly grungy people.
Oh, he does look very happy.
Yeah. So it's worth noting that Kurt was in chronic pain for most of his life due to some stomach issues he had. There's some again, like, there's no facts here. Like, there's some conflict about he tells people he's in chronic pain to justify his heroin use, or was he in chronic pain and that's why he started using heroin? Like, we don't know. It's up in the air.
Did you hear like the stuff that like it was because he played his guitar with the wrong hand?
No.
So I feel like, okay, this might be totally wrong, but I feel like I saw something that the way that he held his guitar was like not the natural way that someone should hold their guitar, and this and especially with like his like dexterity, like he should have done it with the other hand. But because of that, he was like putting weird pressure on his stomach, and that was like part of the problem he was having.
Oh well, that could be a component of this for sure. Yeah. So we don't know. We don't know if one came before the other, but we do know, obviously, that Kurt dabbled in a lot of drugs and alcohol. He was not a stickler about the drugs that he used. He basically used everything. Like whatever was there and available at the time, he would use. Like I'm gonna get into a lot of his ODs, and like some of his ODs,
A lot of his ODs, Jesus.
yeah. So some of his ODs didn't even involve heroin. He would just find whatever he could find, just take it. He's numb, like totally wanted to numb himself out. He would start using heroin in particular off and on starting in 1986, which I think is the year he formed Nirvana, if I remember what I said correctly earlier. So of all the drugs out there, it seemed like heroin is the last one you'd want to like be using and still be functional on. I've obviously never done it, but I read up a ton on what just opiates in general do, and it seems like it mostly just numbs you to everything. Some symptoms of opiate intoxication are nodding off suddenly. It slows down your breathing. There's itching, tremor, slurred speech, impaired coordination, clouded thinking, disorientation, impaired memory. Basically, all the things that are counterproductive to maintaining a career in a family life. I mean, look, obviously, I feel like it just goes without saying. I'm just harping on this a little bit too much, but Kurt was like an incredibly reckless user because I literally just stated I'm going to get into his ODs, and I used plural in that. It almost felt like he knew that his story arc would be more romantic if he died tragically, which is like contributed to his heroin usage.
Yeah.
Okay, like this is the part where I stand up for Courtney Love, which I don't know how many people have said that before in the history. Courtney really tried to keep him somewhat on the straight and narrow, which like, she's a tragic character in her own right. Like she would also be doing heroin with him and also be doing all kinds of different drugs. And there's like a whole history of her. Frances Bean got taken away from them because she said in a Vanity Fair article that she did heroin when she was pregnant with. Like she's not like a terribly sympathetic character, but in the context of these two, she actually did try. So she was kind of, by the time Nevermind came out and he blew up and became who he became, she almost became like his manager. And whenever he'd have to go places and she wasn't with him, she would always tell drivers that they were not allowed to detour anywhere because oftentimes he would detour and go to a drug dealer and go buy heroin.
Yeah.
I think part of the public perception of her was kind of rooted in this thing where Kurt is like this free-spirited dude, just woo-woo whatever, and she's like a taskmaster, but she's not really like, all she's trying to do is make sure her husband doesn't just like die on the road.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, the stories I was reading was like, he actually really did love her. Like when he would disappoint her, he would just turn to this like sheepish child. And when people saw that, they were like, oh, she's being mean to Kurt. And it's like, no, he's just like feels bad that he disappointed his wife in that moment. I read one story in the New Yorker, which was an article by Michael Azerrad called My Time with Kurt Cobain. And Michael actually wrote a biography with Kurt and became pretty close to him throughout his life, to the point where Kurt would ask him to attend business meetings with him just so he wasn't surrounded by business people alone. And at one of these meetings, he talks about how Kurt got up to go to the bathroom. He thought Kurt had probably just left because he just took so long to come back. And Kurt came back and was obviously just high as shit on heroin. And everybody just kind of ignored it because he's with these business people and like, who cares? Like, he's a genius. Let him do his genius thing, which is like, let him get fucked up as much as he wants. We're going to make money off him anyways. Apparently, Michael walks him back to the hotel that he's staying at with Courtney. And again, like, Courtney's just like disappointed in him. And that night, he ODs.
And they have a baby.
Yeah, at this point, at this point, they have Frances Bean. So, like, again, think about this from Courtney's perspective. Like, you're raising a child, you're trying to manage this insane career that you have on your own, that your husband has, and also this guy just constantly out of his mind doing heroin. So, in my opinion, Courtney's the one who's, like, she's the one who got fucked in this situation, more than Kurt did. Kurt's drug use accelerates quite a bit, and at this point, so I counted 3 ODs at this point, where Courtney herself had to be the one to inject him with Narcan to bring him back.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So there was a tour stop, which is apparently the last one they did. This was in Munich, and Kurt gets actually sick from bronchitis and laryngitis. So He goes to Rome to pursue medical treatment, and Courtney meets up with him there. This is March 3rd that Courtney meets him in Rome for medical treatment. March 4th, he
Mhm.
ODs again.
Oh my God.
And this OD actually wasn't heroin. He from what I recall, I didn't write this down, but from what I recall, it was alcohol and Rohypnol that he ODs on at this
What?
time. Yeah. I
Who?
don't know
What?
why that
That's
is,
crazy.
but
Yeah.
I would assume as an addict, you just get whatever you can get, right?
Yeah, he's just trying to numb everything. I mean, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I wrote down this just obviously keeps happening a lot. So later on, Courtney would, again, we don't know the facts. Later on, Courtney stated that this was a suicide attempt. We don't know.
Hmm.
Because earlier on, they said it's just an OD. Because part of this is also couching it as like, he's a genius. Like, geniuses do heroin. Like, this is
Right.
normal.
Totally.
So,
That's so dumb. Yeah.
so to them, they're like, it's better if we just say that he OD'd on heroin than that we say he took Rohypnol and alcohol to try and kill himself, basically.
Hmm. Yeah.
So after this incident, Courtney, the bandmates, friends, they all staged an intervention. This is on March 25th of 1994. Kurt loses his mind because he is the guy. Like, he's, who are you to tell me what to do? Like,
Mhm.
I'm Kurt Cobain. Eventually, he agrees to go to rehab. He went to a rehab clinic on March 30th. So 5 days after this intervention, he goes to the rehab clinic. He lasts 3 days before he scales the fence, takes a cab to LAX, and flies back to Seattle. At this point, nobody knows where Kurt is. So
Mhm.
Courtney ends up hiring a private investigator around April 3rd to try and find him again. He just disappears. Again, we publicly demonize her, but look at what this woman had to do. She
No,
hired a private
totally.
investigator.
To find
So
her husband who's like abandoning his family to do drugs.
yeah.
Yeah.
So on April 8th, an electrician came to Kurt and Courtney's house to install a security system. And at that point, that is when they discover Kurt's body. He's the one who finds the body. He had
Mhm.
shot himself under the neck, under the chin, and he left a suicide note. He was also, not surprisingly, super, super high on heroin when they did the autopsy. There is some debate as to whether he would have died anyways because of the heroin.
Mm.
I learned so much about heroin researching this. So the reason it is debated is because we don't know if the amount of heroin in his system that they measured was called free morphine or whether it was
Mhm.
total morphine. Free morphine is what you inject at that time. Total
Mhm.
morphine is what is in your system always because you're a habitual user.
Oh.
Yeah, if the amount they found in his system was free morphine, then yeah, he would have OD'd. He would have died anyways. Whether he would have shot himself or not, he would have died.
Mhm.
If not, then probably not. The gunshots would have had to have taken him out. During the autopsy, it is assumed that he died on April 5th. So again, he flees the place, whatever, the recovery place on the 3rd, gets to Seattle. He sneaks up into this greenhouse that is a 2-story greenhouse, apparently. And he just kind of chills there doing drugs and whatever he's doing at that time. Nobody
Mhm.
finds him. Like, apparently there's a bunch of people coming in and out of the house, but nobody finds him because I looked at pictures of the house. The greenhouse was separate from the main house.
Mhm.
And they're all junkies and nobody's
Yeah.
going to plant flowers at this
I've seen
time.
that. I've seen that too. And like, yeah, like I think like didn't like the private investigator missed it too. Like he didn't even see the house, the
Yeah.
greenhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. If you want, because I know you want to Zillow everything, Taylor, the house is
Ooh.
171 Lake Washington Boulevard in Seattle. This estimate is $7.8 million, which, given the fact that his guitar alone sold for $6 million, that's a bargain.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice. Oh, it has a nice view of like some water.
It's weird. I actually don't find the house creepy, even though somebody died in it.
It does have it says has this well on the Zillow picture it has like a smidge of like Amityville lights, that is fun. It's huge. 8,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's huge.
Holy
Yeah.
shit. There's only 4 bedrooms? I feel like there should be more bedrooms.
You don't find it creepy, do you?
Mm,
Like, when I think about the Tote family and like living in that house, that scares me. But living like the
yeah.
house Kurt Cobain killed himself in, that actually doesn't scare me.
No, not really. And wait, when did he die?
This one in 94.
So when in 94?
April. They think it's April 5th, which I
So
really
he
should
did
have waited 3 weeks to do this episode, and it would have been on his anniversary, and I totally botched it.
boo. So he bought it in I love Zillow. God bless Zillow. They bought it in in January 1994 for $1.4 million.
Yeah.
And then she sold it in 1997 for 2.8, and then it sold in 2020 for 7.
Yeah.
Cool. Continue.
Okay. Now your Zillow sleuthing is unrivaled.
Fucking love Zillow. I want to know everything. Ugh.
It's worth noting that there were other moments that were building up to this. Again, going back to Courtney's life being a living hell. So the gun Kurt used actually wasn't his own because his guns had been confiscated multiple times by the police because there were multiple reports of Courtney calling the cops saying Kurt has locked himself in a bathroom, high as shit on heroin, with a loaded gun and threatening to kill himself. So this is reported.
Good on the cops.
Yeah, they show up and be like, okay, we're just gonna go ahead and take your guns away from you. But yeah, what a living hell. So on the conspiracy side of this, there's a ton of conspiracy surrounding Kurt's death. Most of them revolve around Courtney having killed Kurt, which these people are generally pretty awful.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who are saying this stuff for the most part are at best tangentially connected to Kurt and Courtney. They're basically just like these hangers-on and losers. So this includes the private investigator who Courtney initially hired to find Kurt. He also said Courtney must have killed him, which is like, what a loser. Like, you want to
there were
become
two
famous.
documentaries that came out at the same time about this.
There's a ton.
Long time ago.
There's so many documentaries about this. I watched one of them last night, actually. Also, Courtney's father came out saying that Courtney probably killed Kurt. Like, how the fuck do you know?
Dick.
Yeah. I wrote this down because apparently during the divorce, Courtney's divorce proceeding, or during Courtney's parents' divorce proceeding, there were several people that came out and testified that her dad, the one who said that she killed Kurt, also used to dose her with LSD when she was a toddler.
Ew.
Yeah. Like, there was a ton of other allegations against him. No matter what, he had full custody revoked for ever like seeing her when she was a kid. So
I was trying to be in the news.
I'm relevant. I'm important. I know Courtney Love. I'm her dad. I should probably talk about the suicide note for a bit. So it's kind of long. It's at least a full page in length, maybe a little bit longer than that. And it starts out really just talking about his career, about how he knows he should be enjoying this more than he really is. He references Freddie Mercury in it, and he says that he really paid attention to how much Freddie Mercury enjoyed like the adoration of crowds, and he was like, I wish I could be like him and like enjoy it the way he enjoys it. So he has the wherewithal to be really self-reflective in this moment, despite probably at this point being super, super high. And he totally understands the nature of what he's doing and what he's leaving behind by doing this. I'll read a little bit of the. I mean, this sounds like it's going to be a lot, but this is actually a really small subset of the suicide note itself. So I'm quoting this exactly. There's good in all of us, and I think I simply love people too much, so much that it makes me feel too fucking sad. The sad, little, sensitive, unappreciated Pisces. Jesus, man, why don't you just enjoy it? I don't know. I have a goddess of a wife who sweats ambition and empathy, and a daughter who reminds me too much of what I used to be, full of love and joy. And that terrifies me to the point where I can barely function. I can't stand the thought of Frances becoming the miserable, self-destructive death rocker that I've become. I have it good, very good, and I'm grateful. But since the age of 7, I become hateful towards all humans in general, only because it seems so easy for people to get along that have empathy. Only because I love and feel sorry for people too much, I guess. Thank you all from the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach for your letters and concerns during the past years. I'm too much of an erratic, moody baby. I don't have the passion anymore, and so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade out. Peace, love, empathy. Kurt Cobain, Frances and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. I love you. I love you.
I think he could have used some therapy and some other kinds of drugs.
Yeah.
Like, he's depressed. He's antidepressants.
Yeah.
And
I wonder like what would have happened if he like didn't do that, like who he'd be right now, because I look at like Dave Grohl, like they're so different. Like Dave Grohl and Chris Novacek, like they were not junkies at all. Like they never did drugs. Like they did not go down that path. And you look at them now and you're like, they're just like groovy 50-year-old people like doing cool shit, feeding to the homeless. Like, I don't know what would have happened to Kurt, but
how did Taylor Hawkins die?
Who's
He died of
Taylor
drugs?
Hawkins?
He did. So Taylor Hawkins was the drummer of the Foo Fighters. He just died. He died last year, about a year ago, and he died of a drug overdose. And
Really?
he died in Colombia while they were on tour, I think. And it says that his toxicology, so that he had opioids, antidepressants, THC, like a bunch of drugs in his system.
Jeez, something about that lifestyle. Um, so yeah, I wrote down that line, better to burn out than to fade out. I really want to just, if I have the wherewithal, I'm gonna scream that from my deathbed. That is such a good line.
Perfect.
So legacy wise, look, like he basically died rock and roll royalty. He's now part of this 27 Club, which we all know what that is.
Hmm.
I mean, look, he's on that list with Joplin, Morrison, and Hendrix. Like that's the caliber
Weird.
of person that he became. And Amy
Hmm.
Winehouse died at 27 too. I forgot about that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Courtney would go on. She'd create more music, more movies. She never remarried. There's some like she kind of seemed like she kept being like kind of a junkie in a lot of ways. But again, I'm not gonna fault her. She's going through a lot of shit and a lot of trauma. Francis inherited a huge chunk of Kurt's estate and now owns the rights to his name and images. Um,
Nice.
yeah, she is like she's loaded. Like Kurt's estate, like his likeness is worth so much money. I forgot what the exact number was, but
Hmm.
it was somewhere in like the $400 million range. Is like what that value of like just having access, having the licensing rights to that is what the estimates
Hmm.
are worth. She married a musician that everybody compared to Kurt in 2014. They divorced, and now she's basically just living her life, doing her thing. She looks exactly like Kurt and Courtney's child, like
It's amazing. She's
exactly.
so pretty. Yeah, no, she looks exactly like both of them.
Yeah,
But wait, I have a question. You don't
shoot.
think it's weird the way that the gun was and how he could have killed himself? Because I know that's part of the conspiracy is like he would have had to like it was like a rifle under his chin.
Yeah, he would have had to pull it with like his thumb or something like, or his foot. Like, yeah, I've heard those rumors too. My thing is, I'm just thinking about it like from a human nature perspective. He's like the biggest thing. He's like the biggest artist, biggest like celebrity in the world. Like, if somebody had done that, wouldn't we have figured that out? Like,
That's fair.
like if Courtney had actually, and also you read the suicide note, there's nothing suspicious about the suicide note. Like, I mean, people have
Hmm.
claimed that maybe that's not his handwriting, but it was, and
Yeah.
he definitely states that like I'm doing that. Like, it doesn't, it's not ambiguous as maybe not a suicide note. And also, he would
Hmm.
have probably died anyways because of the heroin overdose.
Yeah. I mean, he was probably with like whatever you said, like the morphine that was like in his body kind of like permanently. He was probably like rehab was probably physically fucking terrible because he probably was like doing a bunch of like withdrawals and stuff, you
I
know?
can't even believe he made 3 days. That's insane.
Yeah. That sounds terrible.
So that's them. And like I said, I kind of framed this as Courtney was the one that kind of got the rough end of this because
Yeah.
Kurt's the bigger celebrity, and we all loved Kurt.
And then yeah, and then people are like mad at her when she was just like trying to keep her family together. And then also, yeah, aren't there like terrible pictures of her like holding Francis and crying outside their house and stuff
Yeah,
that like and like people like wouldn't leave her alone and all of that. So yeah, that's awful.
yeah. So that's
Rock stars, man.
yeah. Just God, like so much heroin. Like I just wall. Like I cut out so much of this story because I literally just would have said heroin 500 more times.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, that's why we had coffee. So
Yeah, that's
a little
fair.
Seattle story. But yeah, that's my story. And now I'm gonna once I wrap this up, go look at tulips at Home Depot.
Nice. I'm gonna listen to some Nirvana. At the Airbnb I'm staying at, the fridge plays music. It's like has a whole screen on it. So I'm going to maybe
Fancy.
I'll put some Nirvana on it. It's been playing Pitbull. But I'll put Nirvana on.
Mr. Worldwide. Mr.
Hmm.
305. I watched so HBO, if you have HBO Max, they have a great documentary about Nirvana in general, but specifically Kurt and Courtney, called A Montage of Heck, which is like a
Ooh.
lot of just live footage of recordings of them just hanging out together. And I mean, it is grungy. It's very
Yeah.
grungy.
Yeah.
Some of it's hard to watch, but it gives you really good insight into like their lives. But anyways,
Totally. What a
so yeah,
time.
what a time. What a time.
Crazy. Shout
Um,
out to everyone all those grunge girls who were all black for like a year afterwards.
seriously, it's still
Bless their
hot.
hearts.
It's still hot. I don't like. I'm still drawn to that. But
No, yeah, oh yeah. Nothing's wrong with that. But they did
yeah,
it specifically because Kurt Cobain died. and they were so sad.
I listened to this one podcast where this guy was talking about where they were talking about his death, and they're like, he was like, yeah, I wasn't into his music, I didn't really know. But then later, I became when I was like a late teenager, I got into his music, and for one day, I wore a black band around my around my arm. Because I was so like distraught over his death. He died like
even though it
10
already
years,
happened.
Yeah, he died like 10 years earlier, and everybody was like, I don't understand. Did like a firefighter die, or like why are you wearing this black band?
I think I just remembered.
Yeah,
That's fair. You can still like discover the music and be sad about it.
yeah.
You know, yeah.
Do you want to call out? Do you want to be the one that calls out? Please rate and review us.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for sticking through this episode. I feel like I learned a lot about rock and roll relationships. Hopefully my tulip story makes sense in the context of whatever we're building here. But thank you, everyone. Please continue to rate us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, everyone who's left a review. Even if you don't listen to podcasts, just please subscribe on something. Everything's free. We also just went on YouTube. I am uploading our episodes. They're not like actual videos yet. It's just like our logo and then our voices. But if that's how you listen, we're there now too. And we're everywhere on Facebook and Instagram at Doomed to Fail Pod. And that's our email address, doomedtofail@gmail. Pod.
Very well said.
Whatever. Send us a message.
Sweet. Awesome.
Thank you.
I will go ahead and wrap up then. Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Farz.
Recording is